Well, hello there. I hope everyone is well. I'm Avril Hepner from BDA Scotland, and our Blethers today will focus on the issue of foster caring. So we'll be talking to someone who has experience as a foster carer with children. And we're looking at that topic in this episode particularly because last month the government launched a number of initiatives relating to foster care and the care of children. And so we wanted to consider that initiative to recruit more foster carers in relation to the deaf community. So our guest tonight will be talking to us about their experience, about their journey, how they became a foster carer, and generally talking to us about it. Now, remember that this session is not really an in-depth analysis of the law in relation to foster care. It's a superficial discussion around the topic with some tips and hints and experiences, which will hopefully make you more interested in the topic and hopefully prompt you to send in some questions or some comments for our guest today. So thank you for joining us. And I think this is going to be a very, very interesting session. Now, I know that we've looked at this topic before. We were talking at that time to someone who is a prospective foster carer, but today we're talking to someone who is experienced foster carer, and it's Nathan. Hello.
Hi, Avril. Nice to see you.
Hello. Oh, thanks so much for coming in, Nathan. Could you just introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
Hi, everyone. My name's Nathan, and this is my sign name. And I'm here in Manchester.
So I gathered that you have been involved in foster caring for a number of years, and I'd like to take you back to the start of that journey, to where it all began, and ask how it was that you got to be interested in foster caring. Where did you get that idea from?
I'm not really sure. I started fostering probably about 7 years ago. And prior to that, I suppose I was considering my own family, starting my own family. I'm a gay man, and I wanted to consider if that was possible for me, whether I could adopt or foster, if I could donate sperm. And then I decided that perhaps sperm donation and fostering might be the way for me to go.
So tell us a little bit more about sperm donation. I'm not sure that people will know that sign.
Yeah, so it was basically donating my sperm in that medical situation.
So did you do that first and then go on to foster caring, or were you doing both at the same time?
I think, well, fostering probably 7 years, sperm donation 5 years. So they're in parallel now, I guess. We do both.
Okay. And so the process of becoming a foster carer, you say you've been doing that for 7 years.
Yeah, absolutely. 7 years. I went through that process. I would say the process totally took about a year. I had assessments, for example, contact with a social worker, various questions about my background, my work life, etc., and my relationships or previous relationships. So pretty in depth. You have to really expose yourself to that. So it's quite intensive.
Okay, so quite a lot of information about your background and why you've made that decision and so on. And so in terms of the fostering process, how does that work exactly? So say, for example, you've decided now that you want to be a foster carer. So what comes next? Where do you go? Do you go to a local authority? Do you go to a private agency? What happens? Tell us more about that.
I'm trying to remember actually. Well, it was about 8 years ago now. I think I made a decision and I Googled. I Googled, as people do, and looked in my area and seen what the process was. I realised there was a centre not far from where I was living, and I went in and introduced myself and said I'd be really interested in becoming a foster carer. And they gave me the application form. And really, I met thereafter with a social worker. And at that time, when I met with the other professionals, They were, I was deaf, of course, and I wondered about communication, because it may well be that if I had, any hearing children in terms of communication, how would that work out? I went to an agency initially, and they didn't particularly want to accept me. They didn't have really an open mind at that point, and I was a bit disappointed, of course, because that, I'm sure, isn't the process for hearing potential carers. So the first couple of agencies really didn't accept me. They let me down somewhat. And then I know from my background, my work, I'd got some contact and support from someone, and having had those two letdowns, they basically supported me. I met a social worker. They visited my home, and again, we had a good relationship. We chatted about the potentials that I could do, and really, that social worker had such an open mind. I was really lucky to meet that person and to enter the process.
So third time lucky with those agencies, really. And are these private agencies or are they council agencies? How does that work?
There's two ways, actually. There is a private agency, there is a council as well. And the initial agency I went to was private. I then went to the council, but now, third time lucky, it's a private agency. Um, I think there's less support under the council. Within an agency, there's a lot of support available. There's social work there, different areas of support. The council, I believe, are limited in what they can provide, not just funding, but the other support.
Okay. Nathan, I spotted there just a little moment ago. You said you started sort of 7, 8 years ago. You've been fostering for 7 years now. Now, I'm thinking that means that you've been working through COVID. So, did you get a placement before COVID, or how did COVID affect you?
Oh, now let me think of when I got my license, actually. I think it was 2018, 7 years, yeah. So 2018, of course, we know that COVID was 2 years later. I was certificated then, I had the approval, everything was ongoing. Probably about a month after I received that approval, I got my first child.
That's
Um,
quick.
I did anticipate I'd have to wait, for a few months or maybe a year. And of course, there's a lot of training provided. And the other people that were there had also said that they had children pretty quickly as well. So that was good.
So, how many children have you fostered during that 7 years?
I've had 4 children since then, in that 7 years.
Okay, and what ages are they? And could you tell us a little bit about them?
I had a 15-year-old boy, first of all. Then I had a girl, also 15. Third child was a boy, younger, at age 5. He was also autistic and had ADHD, so, that was, more difficult. And now I've got a boy at 13.
Wow, okay, so that's quite a variety. So you've applied, you get these forms, Nathan, and did you say, I just want deaf children? Are there criteria? Can you say, I want just deaf children, I want this age group, I want people from this area? Can you tell us a bit more about how that works?
Well, I suppose it's based on their criteria, do you mean, or mine?
No, I mean, what did you put on your form? Can you make that choice?
Well, I think when I started the process and said that I wanted to foster, I was able to say that, I wanted a deaf child or perhaps someone who could sign if they're from a deaf family, for example. So there might be clear communication between us. You can also choose an age. I wanted from age 4 up to, say, 18, or 4 to 12, 11 to 18. I think there was two different age groups. So on average, I reckon it's about 11 to 18. It's rare that you get younger children.
Okay, so you've sent off your form. And you've told us that they come and research into your background, and you have to sort of, it's quite exposing. You have to tell them all about yourself. Um, And once you've got through that, I mean, I'm assuming they provided interpreters for this, did they, Nathan?
Yes, they did. The agency provided an interpreter, which was great. And it was really interesting because, I asked for support from Access to Work and that wasn't provided because it's fostering and it wouldn't come under that provision. So it's
Interesting.
almost working, but I couldn't understand why I didn't match that criteria. So it was essentially self-employment. But yeah, anyway, they wouldn't do it. I mean, even now, I've asked for support and they wouldn't provide that.
Interesting. So the fostering agency were the people providing the interpreters for meetings and so on.
Yeah, they provided all that. It was their responsibility, essentially.
And you told us that it took about a year. And you said earlier when we were talking that you had to go through a panel and they asked you lots of questions. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, I went through about a year. I'd met with the social worker several times. They would visit my house. They made sure that my home was suitable. I live in a flat, so made sure that there was sufficient space and rooms available for kids. We had references, of course, that had to happen. Personal references from friends. It couldn't be family. And I think normally you would ask for perhaps 2 if you were going for a job, but in this situation, you asked, I think there was 6 people, 6 references I had to get. And then after everything else, you have a panel interview, essentially, and you're then told whether you've passed or failed. And then it may be the panel. I think you're told maybe a month before you attend panel, and there's around 20 people around the room.
20.
And it may be that they're teacher, ex-social worker, also foster carer, different experiences around the table. And yeah, I went into the agency building, I remember, up the stairs and into the room. And, there was it was like a police interview. But yeah, everyone around the room and everyone asked you questions.
Well, and of course you passed through that, being questioned by 20 people. And was it a fairly quick decision? Did they let you know whether you've been successful quite quickly? And what happened after that?
Yeah, I think probably 2 weeks later, I got the information. I got a letter to say that I'd been successful. And, they gave me the congratulations and said I'd been approved. And again, that was approval for age group between 4 and 18. And it had my profile, my background, what I'm able to provide, and so on. And that I have 2 cats, I have 2 pets, and that would be circulated to the local authority, that this was a new approval, and they would see if there was any matches for me to take a child into my home to foster care for. And it wouldn't give you any information on the child at that point. It just gives you some information. If there was a match there provided, the social worker would chat things through. You would go through that process and agree whether it was a suitable match.
Okay, so have most of the 4 children that you've had been from care homes or from families, or?
I think they've all had different situations, in fairness, that they've came from. It might be there was one deaf person in a children's home with the majority of hearing children. So they're very isolated and lonely. So
Yeah.
having them come into my home and having that communication, that shared culture is obviously lovely. Because, for example, it's difficult to come out of a family in that sense and be taken immediately into a children's home without that communication. It must be very different. So yeah, it was certainly worthwhile. So that was one child. I think another one was from a family straight away. They came to me. So it was a different situation. The social worker had decided that, they basically had to come into my care. So they were taken away from the family, sadly. So it was very emotional. The third child, the mother went into hospital, unfortunately. So they needed some treatment there. So the child needed to be looked after. And that was just a short-term placement, just for a month or so. And when mum got out of hospital and went back home, the child returned to the mother in the family home. The fourth child had been in previous foster care, and I think the couple had separated, sadly, and so that change had meant that there was a change to the foster caring situation, so they came to me. So very flexible, very changeable.
Yeah, they've all come from very different circumstances, aren't they? So, when you're looking at being a foster carer, are there criteria for that? Do you have to be over 21, or what are the rules?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is you have to be over 21. I actually still feel that that's quite young. I would say it's better if you're older, you have more life experience, certainly, but that is the rule. So, yeah, over 21. Secondly, you must have a room for the child, there must be a space. So, they have an independent room, they're not allowed to share with anyone. You can't have two people sharing a room, for example, so they have to have their own space.
Okay.
Thirdly, you mustn't have had been in any trouble in terms of criminal record. There will be a DBS check, of
So you
course.
talk about DBS in Scotland, but a DBS in England, but we have obviously a different system in Scotland. But we know what you mean in terms of clearance. So do you get people coming into your home and being monitored? What's your experience of that? Are you
Yeah,
monitored?
such a long time ago, actually, now. But yeah, I remember when I was matched to the child, I think we informally had a meet, let's say. We met up, we perhaps done that a few times. The child might come to my home and I'd visit them somewhere else, and then they might come in and have stay for one night. But if it's an emergency situation, that's different. I think if it's going to be a long-term placement and they plan to stay for several months, then it can be a different process. But of course, you can be put in an emergency situation and the child comes in quickly.
Sure. So there are a number of visits, then maybe they come to stay, then perhaps a social worker comes and checks if everything's going all right. Do they come like on a weekly basis, or what
I
does that
suppose,
what happens there?
I suppose it depends on the child, depending on their own emotional state and so on. So if the child seems happy in this environment, we'll carry that on for perhaps a couple of weeks, maybe a month at total, and then, yeah, we'll have that placement.
So is there a lot of planning and a lot of preparation before you accept a child? Because you're going to have people coming into your house, aren't you? Social workers perhaps coming in and out. So you must have to take quite a lot of time on that. So must you take sort of one child at a time, or can you have a number of children coming into your house at once?
I did accept one child at a time at that point. It was just myself and the child in my house, in my flat. When I moved to my house, I now have 3 bedrooms. So, I could take more. Anybody who's fostering, if they have 5 or 6 bedrooms, obviously they can take more children because it's dependent on that space they're able to provide.
Okay, so it's determined by the rooms. All right, so you've got someone coming in. Are you paid for your time, or do you do it voluntarily, or what's the relationship there?
Well, fostering is essentially self-employment and you're paid for that. So you'll get a wage, if you like, you'll get those earnings for yourself. You'll also get some money for the child's cares. And for example, I mean clothing, food, in that sense. So yeah, you do get money for myself, but I also get money for the child.
Okay, so an allowance for the child and a sort of wage for you. So it's kind of like a job, really, as it were,
Yeah, I mean, I never call it a job, in fairness. I call it an income.
an
I guess
income. Okay,
because, yeah, if people say, "Is that what you do? Is that what you work as?" But I just think it's more personal than that. There's more sensitivities about it. It's in my home. Yeah, it's an income,
sure,
but it's not a job essentially for me.
sure. Okay, and so, do you have to go on training courses, or, um, uh, I mean, and if you do, what kind of training, and is it dependent on what kind of child?
Well, during that application process over the year, you'll have the interviews, as I've mentioned, and then perhaps one weekend you'll have a residential course you'll go somewhere. I think at the time it was about 10 of us who were all new to fostering.
Okay.
And we went on a course, it was Skills to Foster. So, yes, so Skills to Foster, we went along and it was a full weekend. I did have 2 interpreters, which was great. It was really interesting. We talked about trauma, for example.
Oh, so childhood trauma. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, just linked to the theory of trauma and how you can connect if children have become quite disconnected from that in terms of emotional state. So yeah, a lot of coursework. Thereafter, you get the certificate, if you like, and there was a workbook as well that was provided. And you then have to go through these different training sessions to show that you have been able to master things like trauma, engagement, food hygiene, specific policies that you need to be aware of, and so on. So after you're basically qualified, you then have this folder of evidence that you're able to provide finally through that application process to show that you've provided all that evidence.
So that sounds like a lot of reading if you're talking about going through policies and things. What about people who have English as a second language? Do you get an interpreter provided for that?
Well, I guess I was lucky, I was able to read all the information. I think if there was any other deaf people interested, they could go through VRS and have an interpreter there who could provide that additional support.
That's a good idea. Okay, so you go through all this specific training on sort of behavior and various other things. Could you give us any more examples of the kind of training courses you did?
Well, I'm sure after 2 or 3 years, you have to do refresher courses, and one of them was in terms of managing allegations.
Why is
So
that?
it's possible that the child doesn't like me for whatever reason, and they accuse me of abuse, or it could be anything. So the social worker, of course, has to listen to the child first. So if there's an allegation made, the child will be taken away from my home and there would be an investigation carried out. And they would have to try and establish whether the child was telling the truth or whether it was manipulating the situation. So it's something that you always have to prepare for, I guess, and keep at the back of your mind that that is a possibility. And if that really went any further, whether you would have to go to court to try and prove your that you hadn't been guilty. There is the PACE.
PACE? What's this?
So that is, for it might be that a child's behaviour isn't the best. Of course, you're not allowed to smack a child or, have any abuse and anything like that. You have to be able to talk through things, carefully, sensitively, so that a child can accept that my way as a parent, in that sense, because you have to remember that some of the children come into your care, they may have been through trauma. So you have to really consider how you would approach situations and not show any aggressive nature in that way. You have to be sure that you have empathy for that child and understand their situations. So a lot of training involved.
Okay, so that's a useful acronym, isn't it? PACE. And also, I'm assuming you have to do safeguarding, but that empathy is important.
Yeah, safeguarding is really important, actually. All of the training is, and that's certainly one of those. That safeguarding is very key to going through the application process. I think first aid as well is also really important. Food hygiene, preparing food, making sure that you understand the situation with food hygiene.
So it's quite a lot to learn before you can actually start. So you said once you get a child, you get an income for yourself, an allowance for the child for clothing and food and so on. Does that mean you had to give up full-time work in order to foster, or do you continue to work, and how do you manage that work-life balance?
Well, when I started fostering back then, I was still teaching at the time, but it was part-time. And at that time, I'd probably start maybe teaching from 8 till 5, but bringing a child into my home, I had to consider my hours. And the child has to be the priority when you foster.
That
So
makes
I
sense.
decided that I would have to change my work situation. So I reduced some hours to make sure I could match the children in my care. And it means you can carry on working for sure, and that's what I've done through those 7 years. I've changed my work hours, but now I actually change my work. So I now am a support worker with a charity, and that's been useful. It's more flexible.
So you're kind of effectively part-time in order to balance the needs of the child, and it wouldn't be possible to work full-time, am I right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I suppose if you're a couple, you can manage it differently.
Sure.
I'm on my own, so I have to be clever about my time and how I manage.
And has that been fine, in terms of getting part-time work?
Yeah, I'd have to say my bosses, my management, in the past have really been very understanding. And now that I'm doing some supply support work, it works really well. If I don't have any work on, I can just focus on my fostering full time. And then I'm obviously earning an income, which helps.
And I'm assuming the more children, the more income, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, let's imagine you're fostering, you've got a child who, well, let's say you mentioned, when we were talking before, you mentioned a haircut. So if you had to take the child for a haircut, do you need to seek permission from its parents or from someone else, or how does that work?
Well, again, it's different for each child. You can have a delegation of authority for some children, but it
Right.
might be that a child still has a link with their parent or their mum, and it may be that the parent wants to keep their hair a certain way. For example, I had a girl in the past, she had long hair. So, in that respect, I might not be able to make that decision about whether the child can have a haircut. I would have to delegate that responsibility to the mother, or they might delegate it to me. So, I've had some of the kids in my care that haven't had that parental responsibility in that way. So, the council has delegated the responsibility to me. So, it just depends on the child.
Okay, and if a child is with you for some length of time, and maybe you wanted to go on a trip together or a holiday or something, is that something you can just decide? And is that covered in financially as well in your allowance?
Yeah, absolutely. You can. I suppose if anything comes from the school, if the school was planning a trip with the child, you usually get a form that's directed to the parents or carer, and it means that I can inform the social worker within the council and say, they have a trip planned, and everything can be recorded. So whatever I get from the school, I ensure that I notify the social worker. And it might be if they are going on a trip or we're going anywhere, all the details in terms of hotel has to be passed on to social work.
So anytime they're away from your home, you have to inform the local authority. And do you get extra funding for that?
If I was one to take the child on holiday for 2 weeks, say, yeah, absolutely, you would get additional funding for that. And also, there'll be some funding for Christmas presents, for example.
Oh, really? Okay. So presents for Christmas and birthdays and that sort of thing, that would be annually? Okay, that's interesting. Okay. And if you're caring, fostering quite a lot and you need a break, you need some respite yourself, is there a capacity to do that?
Yeah, I can have some respite. Absolutely, I can get 2 weeks every year. And if I want to do that, I need to prepare. I have some backup carers available.
Oh, I can see your cat, sorry.
That wants to join in the conversation this evening. Yeah, they're an additional carer here. Yeah, so if I want to do that, I can get in contact with the backup carers. It might be I just want a week or perhaps 2 weeks, and they will step in. And it means I still get paid through those 2 weeks while I'm on holiday.
So you're actually paid for your respite as well?
Yeah. So I can actually, the other backup carers can be paid.
Can you tell me a bit more about these backup carers? Who are they? Are they registered? Are they also foster carers? Who decides on who the backup carers are? Who chooses?
Well, it might well be that the agency provide some backup carers, but of course, I would say the majority of them would be hearing. And for me, it was important that we had additional backup deaf carers. So I contacted some friends and asked if they'd be interested in becoming a backup carer themselves. And I think they went through the process. It's a streamlined process, takes 1 or 2 months, and it means that I now have 4 backup carers that I'm comfortable with. And it means that it's still within a BSL home life, if you like. So that helps, and that can help with communication.
So does the child go to the backup carer's home, or the backup carer comes to you?
They'll go to the backup carer's home, but the social worker obviously remains in contact with that person with everything and make sure his approval's been given.
So their home has also been monitored and checked and everything before you go on holiday, so the social workers are clear.
Yeah, I mean, I
That's a
think
good.
that, yeah, sorry. I think that, the first couple of years, there's a lot to set up, of course. There's a lot to try and learn. And, I think if anybody's interested that is watching this evening, I would say it'd be lovely for more deaf foster carers to be involved. So please consider it.
So you've had 4 children that you've cared for, and you've got 1 left at the moment. So 3 have sort of flown the nest, as it were.
I have, yeah. My 4th child is upstairs now, gaming. So yeah.
Great. Okay. So the 3 that have flown the nest, you said you had 1 who was with you for a month, 1 who was with you for how many years?
The first one actually that was 15 only left 3 months ago. They've been here for nearly my whole journey for 7 years. The second one was probably about 9 months, and they wanted to move into a female home, and that was fine. The third one was just short term. Everything was sorted out with their mother, as I said. She was in hospital for a short stay. This fourth one that I have at the moment is about a year or so. It was initially just to be a short-term position, they were going to come in, but that could be extended to a year or 2. I think it really depends on the child and whether they're happy. And I think now we can see that that child is really happy, so that will be extended to become long-term.
So that first child that you looked after for, well, that's a period of 7 years, isn't it? And they've flown the nest now, so they're
Yeah,
21, are they?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the maximum is 18, of course. That was the age group, 4 to 18. But when they're 18, it's not just, right, okay, out you go, that's you finished. They can have a staying put, let's say. So
Staying put, okay.
yeah, so we have that. So it means that um, you don't go. It's not the agency per se. It might be that the council are aware that that child is now 18, um, and they might say, right, okay, they can stay until they're 21 or older. Yeah, they
So
have
now the 21-year-old's gone to their own life.
their own flat. Amazing.
Wow. And is it that you can't keep in touch? Is that the end of your relationship there, or what happens next?
Again, it's really up to the child. It's really nice if they go and they keep in contact, and most have, which is lovely. I'll get texts from them. The third child that went back to mum, he was young, and I really obviously haven't had any communication with him, so he's gone. But the other ones are okay. But you can't always prepare for it. You might never see the children again. Of course, that's natural.
So I'm thinking about this relationship you have. You look after somebody for 5 years, and it might be that one day they've just gone. Do you have to be particularly thick-skinned with that, Nathan, or how do you deal with that?
There's a mixture of feelings, I think. It depends what the relationship has been that you've had with that child. I know they're not real blood, for example, but they have been in my house and I've seen this child every day. I've watched them grow up and mature. So it's a difficult one for sure. And it can affect you emotionally, absolutely. There's a lot of self-reflection thereafter, but the social worker, I have to say, they've been great and they can offer any counselling services that you need.
So there are opportunities for support. Is there plenty of support, and is it easy to get? Is the agency very supportive in those kinds of circumstances?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, they're available 24/7 for sure.
Wow. Wow.
I think within the agency, they have a social work team of maybe 20 social workers, and they're always on call 24 hours a day. So, yeah, communication is easy. I remember in the past, the boy that was about 5 wouldn't sleep, obviously, had autism, as I say, ADHD, and it was really difficult. And I think it was August, I remember, it was summertime, the boy just would not sleep. I couldn't get any sleep. It was very difficult to cope, and he didn't go to school that week. So he was just madly running around my home with so much energy. I couldn't get any sleep in the evening. And I thought, I think it got to about 5 o'clock on the Sunday morning. And I thought, I'm just going to text this team. I got a reply back. It was 5 in the morning, remember? Got a text back. I offloaded to the social worker via text. And of course, it was more hearing advice, I guess. They just said, try and calm him down with music. I said, the child is deaf. So we just carried on chatting. I offloaded a little. And actually, just because of that, being able to offload, I felt better. And
Yeah,
knowing
just
that
having
somebody was
someone
there.
there 24/7 and getting a quick response like that is pretty impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Obviously I have equipment, I have vibrating pads and things like that. So yeah, all good. Very impressed by the support that's available.
Grand. I'm sorry, I'm distracted by your cat there. You have a cat. You got 3 cats, you say. So are there policies about pets? Are there rules with that kind of thing if you're bringing in foster children?
Through the application process, it will ask you to include any animals that you have. There are clear questions there. Would your animals bite, for example? What is their behavior? Would they try and eat off a child's plate? What essentially do these animals do? And that is something that they'll continually review through any care plans. You'll make sure that you update that information.
And have you had any problems with your cats and the children?
No, all the kids have had really good relationships with the cats. I think my 3 cats have been quite suitable to, especially the child with autism, for example. There was a good relationship with the cats. Their behaviour was really placid. It was good for the child. Yeah, I don't
So
know
the
why.
cat bonded well with the child with autism. That's a cat thing, maybe?
Yeah, well, I remember I'd read a book or something, and there was some mention of animals, particularly cats, that have a very calming nature on children, particularly with autism.
A therapy animal. Great. Okay. I'm just looking at some of the questions here, Nathan. Could we go back a little bit in time and talk about that foster agency? Are there lots of foster agencies around the UK? Or are they all attached to local authorities? Can you clarify that relationship?
My agency is based in Malvern, and I know, obviously, I'm within the northwest and the northeast. There are Wales. Yes, those various agencies. My agency has various teams throughout those areas, but I'm from the northwest, of course. So that is my agency. But children can come from anywhere. It is obviously better if they're local. And I think specifically if they're a hearing child and they go to a school, a particular catchment area, perhaps, they might have a more local foster carer. I think the first child, he was from Derby School, so that was easily commuted between my home and the school. The second child lived closely to Manchester, so that was okay. The third child perhaps was northeast, maybe 2 hours journey, and obviously they went back to their mum, within quite a short time. The fourth child, okay, quite local, I would say about an hour's drive between, their own location and my home.
Okay, so for our audience watching at home and they're thinking about perhaps becoming foster carers, um, uh, there's a website they should contact. Is that right?
Yeah, my agency company name is Foster Care Charity. There we have it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's now on our screen. This is fostercarecharity.org.uk.
Yeah, I would say have a look at that if you're interested.
And we can actually show you what their website looks like. Here's a screenshot. Okay. And I was just looking through some of these fostering websites, and this one is your particular agency. Did you have a Google at all kinds of other local agencies and contact a number of agencies?
I think if anyone was interested, sorry, I would say look at my agency. Keep an open mind. I think they have a really open mind. Have a look at that because I know that they are really encouraging for people with, specialist backgrounds, let's say, as in someone who's deaf. And really, in terms of having an interpreter, they'll pay for interpreter costs. As I said before, I've used VRS, but I have had the provision of an interpreter. I've not had to pay for that myself. So they've been really fabulous.
That sounds great. Okay, then let me move on to another question. You've talked about fostering, and I know some deaf people might be a little confused at the difference between fostering and adoption. So are they the same thing? Can you change between fostering and adoption, or do you have to pick a particular path?
I don't think only deaf people are confused at those two, adoption and fostering. I think, hearing people are as well. Fostering, I know there's some similarities, but it does lead to confusion because adoption is that you have full responsibility for that child. You've basically become that child's parent. There is no pay. You don't get any
Right.
funding, for example, in that way. But when it's fostering, you're essentially not fully responsible for that child. They're still under the responsibility of the council, the local authority. So it means that it's not me, myself, that would make those important decisions. That would be delegated perhaps to the council. So
And you
again,
just do the
it,
everyday stuff.
absolutely, I look after that person's emotional well-being, their care, but anything to do with the child that's important in that way, then absolutely it would be delegated to the council. But so that's the difference.
Okay, so you've been fostering for 7 years. You've had a number of children. Have you would it be possible that you could foster someone and then decide to adopt them, or are they two separate paths?
Yeah, it's possible. If I was fostering a child and I could consider if they were both, we were both happy, they didn't have any family involvement, for example, then absolutely I could apply for that. I mean, it means that if there is a birth family still present, then of course the child may well go back to the family.
And what's your long-term view? Do you think you might continue to foster, or would you want to adopt?
To be honest, I'm quite happy to foster until I retire. Yeah, who knows what will happen in the future?
So fostering seems to be your long-term vision for now, but you wouldn't rule out adopting if that possibility occurred.
I'd never say never. It would depend on the situation, on the child, whether it was appropriate. Yeah, never say never.
Okay, fair enough. Um, and have you felt that fostering, well, raising the children, seeing them go, does that feel rewarding to you? How does it feel?
Oh, it's very rewarding, yeah. Feel very, it's so worthwhile. I think because you have children that are in various, situations they've come from, and it's really lovely to see that change in the child, to come in perhaps having been through some trauma, but to see them settled is so rewarding. It's brilliant.
So a nice opportunity for you to pass on your skills and watch a child grow and plant the seeds, I suppose, for their future.
Absolutely, and just to feel that that's so satisfied and warm and, proud.
I mean, it's an amazing thing that you're doing, to give up your time to give that input. You must have an enormous heart to kind of support a child on that journey through their life. Um, are there lots of deaf people like you who are foster caring around the UK, or few? You're saying not enough.
There's definitely not enough, Avril. We need more. That's why I would encourage people to get involved. When we talk about people that are deaf, being available 24/7, there's not a lot. I know there's someone in Derby, for example. I don't know of anyone, particularly in my area. We definitely need some more.
So as a foster carer there, as a deaf foster carer, um, that's quite a lonely journey because you don't have any peers really. There's no network group, there's no pals for you to have those conversations with.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a hearing group, that a support group, let's say, and I could go to that with an interpreter, but it'd be nice to have deaf other foster carers there.
And is that something you'd like to see established, a network where deaf foster carers could come together and exchange information and experiences?
Oh, wouldn't that be lovely in 20 years' time to have a key deaf network that can share that information and experience and stories and support?
So you think at the moment there are about 5 or 10 foster carers around there who are deaf?
Yeah, maybe about 5 to 10. Yeah. I mean, I know there's one person who's hard of hearing, but I did meet them, but I realised obviously we didn't share a language in that sense. So it was a different experience that they've come from.
And so you can be single, you can be a couple. As you said, you're a gay man, so that doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just those three pieces of criteria. It doesn't matter whether you're single, gay, straight, a couple. It doesn't matter. I think it's important in terms of your age. So that those three pieces that I provided earlier.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. Well, we've had a comment come in from Erin McCluskey. Erin says, no questions, but I'm loving this live stream. So much useful information. It's also nice to see a real life deaf example. Thank you for sharing your foster journey, Nathan. I can imagine this being very useful for some deaf people who are interested in doing the same as you. Thank you for that current comment, Erin. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Erin. That's lovely.
Yeah, that's great. And we've got another rather long question. And this is from Lee Jordan. Lee is with a partner who's hearing, and they have both applied around 2015, 2017, and they got halfway through the process. They're both in the Shropshire, Telford area, but they wanted his partner to be the main carer and not him because he was deaf. So Lee says their attitude and their lack of awareness about deaf culture was unpleasant. One of the caseworkers commented that they didn't think deaf people could be parents. And in the end, Lee and his partner were rejected because Lee wasn't willing to allow his partner to be the main carer instead of him. And they had to perhaps try a second application. Have you got any comments about that experience, Nathan?
Yeah, listen, don't give up, Lee. I think if you don't have a good fit with the agency, go to another agency. I'd certainly recommend you get in touch with mine. Definitely, they're accepting of deaf people with different backgrounds. So it says you're trying a second application now. If that's not successful, honestly, go to FCC. Third time lucky, could be.
So, your recommendation is if you don't succeed with one particular council or agency, just move on to the next.
Yeah, never give up. Don't give up, please.
Okay, just keep trying then, Lee. And we have a comment coming in from Olive Lyset. Olive says it's a comment, not a question. I've seen you, Nathan, fostering all 4 kids, and you're doing a remarkable job. Very proud of you. That's a lovely, positive comment, isn't it?
Thank you, Olive.
I think you're providing a lot of inspiration to our audience tonight, Nathan, and it's great that you can be a role model for other deaf people who are perhaps thinking of taking this journey.
Well, I hope so. Fingers crossed people get involved.
Well, any further comments and responses, do let me know. Let me move back to my questions for you, Nathan. So did you feel that the process was smooth? You have said that you tried a couple of times and failed, and eventually you were third time lucky. Did you feel you had to fight for interpreters? Was it a smooth process? Were you asking for interpreters, or were they just provided, or how did that go?
Originally, they asked me what my needs were. And of course, as I mentioned before, we were looking at access to work and I was turned down for that. So because they were saying it was, not a real job in that sense. So I did try and go back to them and fight my corner, but unfortunately I was denied again. So because they are we're talking about a charity essentially, I just I felt a bit off because I may well be taking money from the charity to pay for the interpreter for me. So I think when I really got through the process, it meant that every year now, because I'm paid essentially, you have to work out your tax. My own tax is technically a self-employed person. So I was really put off because I had to do a self-assessment and it was talking about, oh, I was due 4,000 or something. I was really, really worried. I did get support from the social worker who helped and say, this is tax deductible. You can obviously exclude this amount of money. So it was okay. So I think the first year was a bit problematic, but thereafter it was fine. So yeah, a bit of a learning curve. But because you are your money that you get is basically for some of the money is for the child, it's tax free, of course.
Okay, useful to have had that support. Okay, and we've got another comment in from Pamela Morgan, who just wants to say, well done, what a wonderful achievement. Again,
Oh,
what a lovely comment. Thank you, Pamela.
thank you, Pamela.
There was something else I wanted to ask, Nathan. I'm just checking my notes. So you've been fostering in your home, it's been residential. Is there a kind of, can you do like a sort of online fostering thing? I'm just thinking that we've all gone digital, haven't we? Can you do a sort of Zoom fostering, online fostering, like at a distance fostering, or must it be a placement within your home, within your domestic situation?
Oh yeah, for sure. It has to be in my home. You couldn't do that through Zoom. I mean, I have to clothe and feed this child. So yeah, absolutely. They would be in my home. Yeah. I think you're thinking about, need to think about building a relationship with that child. I think they have to stay in your house and you treat them like family, essentially. They're in my home.
Okay, so you've got a foster child in your home, and of course you have friends and you have family that might want to visit your home. Do they need to be screened as well?
If it's
How
regular
does that
visitors, like
work?
my father, for example, yeah, there'll be an assessment. There'll be a DBS check on them if they're regular visitors. If it's a one-off, no, that's not required. But certainly if someone was visiting regularly to the family, there would be that assessment.
So really, for one child, this is quite a lot of people who are involved in being assessed and being checked, and yeah.
Yeah, you know how they say it takes a village to raise a child? I think that's true. So we have support from the school, we have social work support, you have family support. So yeah, and everyone has different views and perspectives, of course. But at the end of the day, you have to make the decision yourself and move forward with that.
And so far, you've been fostering deaf children. And of course, education is, as we know, an issue for deaf children. So, are you involved in deciding on the appropriate education provision for the child? Or, or are you allowed to inform that decision?
Well, I certainly can give my perspective, I guess. I was a teacher in the past, so I do have experience. There is, it might be, if the child was local to my area, then it means I can pop in and speak to the teachers, for example. It's different if the school was further away, like Derby, for example.
And do the children sometimes move school? I mean, do you have to ask for parents' permission if they're going to be moved to, and perhaps if the parents disagreed with you, whose decision would carry the most weight?
Yeah, well, what happens is you'll have a meeting, the parents would be there, I'd be there, a social worker, for example, and then we would obviously take into account the children's wishes as well.
Wow, I've just caught sight of the clock, Nathan. We have been talking for nearly an hour. Hasn't time flown? Um, I think we probably ought to just do a little bit of a recap before we close. I can't see any more questions coming in. Can I just ask you of any particularly fond memories you have, or any really good stories you'd like to share about your fostering experiences?
I would say the first child who came in wouldn't make eye contact with me. They just sat with their hoodie up, almost covered their face, and I was trying to be very welcoming, just explaining what I was going to be, what I was going to do. But then, given time, about a week later, they took the hoodie off. I saw their face. We made eye contact, and it was lovely to make that connection.
Oh,
It just took
wow.
a week for them to expose their face. So that was lovely. Yeah, and finally we had eye contact.
Oh, that eye contact moment is giving me goosebumps, I can tell you. Um, So anything that you would like to say to any person in the audience today who is thinking of fostering, any tips or advice to help them move forward?
Definitely do it. Please come forward, get involved. Don't give up. If there's barriers put in your way, please don't give up. You're welcome to email me, get in contact directly with me. I'm happy to support and give you some advice.
So you're happy to advise people directly, Nathan? And as you've said before, if at first you fail, just move to another agency or approach another council.
Yeah, I just feel that there are agencies out there who don't particularly want to accept deaf people as foster carers. So I would say get in touch with my foster care agency and make the ball roll there.
And I think it would be really useful for other deaf people to know that you are there, Nathan, you're offering support, you've had the experience of fostering 4 children, and that if people are having difficulty, then perhaps they could come to a new area, and hopefully we can get more new, fresh people involved in fostering. Any final comment you'd like to share with our audience? Any final piece of advice or a final tip before we leave?
Not really. I would say go for it. Please go for it. Do it. If you're interested, just do it.
Just go for it. And I would like to say, Nathan, thank you so much. It's been so valuable having you here this evening to share your experiences. And, what a wonderfully huge heart you have. And like everybody else has said, congratulations to you. What a wonderful thing you're doing. And I hope that people watching have been very much inspired by your experience.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. I've really enjoyed tonight. Thank you.
And good luck with all of the future children who will be you'll be fostering. And I'm sure, it's going to be so rewarding for you when you look back over what you've done with your life.
Yeah, I'm so excited for the future for me. I want to look back as an old man and think about all the kids I looked after. That would be lovely.
Do you have an ambition? You've done 4 so far. Do you have an ambition of sort of 20, 30, or?
Oh, who knows? Who knows? Given you don't know what situations you're going to be in, but actually, I want to be there to help. So looking forward to that.
Quality, not quantity. I get it.
Avril, absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being involved. And we've had such a fascinating conversation. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Good night. Good night.